So a missile strikes a city, right? And within, like, 10 minutes, you have three entirely different governments releasing three completely different accounts of who fired it, who died, and why it even happened.
Right. It's chaos.
Yeah, absolute chaos. So you pull out your phone, you open up a news article, and immediately you are just hit with this massive wall of conflicting claims. I mean, there's geographical jargon, decades of entrenched history.
Oh, yeah.
And when you are standing in the middle of all that noise, how do you even begin to know what actually happened?
I mean, it is the ultimate cognitive overload. The natural instinct for most people reading international news, especially about, really complex ongoing conflicts, is to just close the tab.
Honestly, yeah.
Because the barrier to entry feels incredibly high. It's like you are walking into a deeply complicated movie, but it's already halfway over.
Which is an incredibly frustrating place to be if you were just trying to be a well-informed citizen.
Exactly.
So today on the Deep Dive, we are basically giving you a shortcut. We're going to build a beginner's toolkit for reading the news.
I love that.
And to do this, we are taking one single, very short news clipping. It's just a few paragraphs from Agence France-Presse or AFP about a recent strike in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put this tiny piece of text under a microscope to really understand the actual mechanics of journalism.
But we should probably set some very strict ground rules before we even start.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we are not here to solve a geopolitical conflict today, at all.
No, definitely not.
We are looking exclusively at the text of this specific article as a real-time case study. So we will remain completely impartial, just exploring how the original journalist objectively conveyed information, right?
Right.
And how they handled competing claims from two sides of the Israeli military and Hamas, who are, actively at war.
Right. So we are essentially dissecting the anatomy of the reporting itself. Because before we can even attempt to understand the geopolitical event, we have to look at how the article announces it to the world and where that information originates. So the very first thing you see when you click the link is the headline. It says, Gaza Civil Defense says Israeli strikes kill 7 overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And right beneath that, we have the dateline. Agence France-Presse, D.I. El-Bala.
See, those two elements right there, they are doing an immense amount of heavy lifting before you read a single sentence of the actual story.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to start with that dateline.
Sure.
Dear El-Bala and the agency AFP. For someone totally new to this, what does that actually mean? Because, we see things like Reuters or AP or AFP all the time, but I think a lot of people just kind of gloss right over them.
Yeah, that's really common. So Agence France-Presse is what's called a wire service. It's also known as a news agency.
Okay.
And their entire business model is based on having highly trained reporters stationed all over the globe. They gather hard news as it breaks.
Oh, so they're like the ground troops of journalism.
Exactly. They are the frontline information gatherers of the world. And then they distribute those factual reports to other newspapers, websites, and broadcasters.
Got it.
And that geographical tag in the dateline, Deir el-Balah, which is a city in the central Gaza Strip, that is critical.
Why is it so important?
Because it establishes the reporter's physical proximity to the event. It is literally a signal to the reader saying, hey, we have a human being on the ground in this specific region filing this report.
Okay, so it's like proof of life for the journalism.
Yes, exactly.
It tells you this isn't just an aggregate blog post written by someone sitting in a swivel chair thousands of miles away guessing at what happened.
Right, they are physically in the environment.
But let's look at the headline again, because there is one word there that I think completely changes the tone of the sentence.
Okay.
And it's the word says. The headline is, Gaza Civil Defense says Israeli strikes kill 7 overnight. Why wouldn't they just write, Israeli strikes kill 7?
Ah, yeah. That is the deliberate choice of attribution. And honestly, in conflict reporting, attribution is everything.
How so?
Well, a good journalist does not act as an omniscient narrator right from the jump. If they didn't personally witness the missiles hit, and they didn't, physically count the casualties themselves, they just cannot state the event as an absolute undeniable fact in their own voice.
Oh, that makes total sense. It makes me think of, the chain of custody in a criminal trial.
Oh, interesting. How do you mean?
Like, the detective testifying on the stand might say, look, I didn't personally see the crime happen, but I am documenting for the record exactly who handed me this bullet and at exactly what time.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. The journalist is identifying the exact origin point of the information.
Right.
They are essentially handing you the evidence in a sealed bag with a tag on it.
But let me push back a little here, just playing devil's advocate.
Sure, go for it.
If the headline attributes the claim right away, essentially putting a degree of separation between the reporter and the event, is the reporter actively doubting the event? Or is that just standard operating procedure?
It's a mix, actually. It's standard procedure, but it's also what we sometimes call epistemological humility.
Whoa, okay. Epistemological humility.
Yeah.
That is a very big, heavy piece of jargon.
Yeah, fair.
Let's translate that for us mortals. You just mean the reporter's formally admitting they don't know everything, right?
Yeah, basically. It means having the professional discipline to admit the limits of your own firsthand knowledge.
Right.
The reporter is saying, I am documenting a claim that has been made in the public sphere by an official agency. It is not about accusing the source of lying at all.
Okay, so it's about boundaries.
Exactly. It's about drawing a very sharp, clear boundary between what the journalist has personally verified with their own eyes and what a secondary agency is reporting. It protects the integrity of the news organization.
Okay, that makes sense. So the journalist has documented this initial claim. But if both sides in a conflict have an agenda, how does a beginner reader even navigate the different versions of reality?
It's tough.
Because once we get into the body of the article, we immediately hit this intense narrative conflict.
Mm-hmm.
In the first paragraph, the Gaza Civil Defense Agency reports 7 people were killed by airstrikes. But literally in the same sentence, the article presents the opposing view, stating that the Israeli military says it had struck an armed terrorist cell.
Right. So we're seeing the classic he said, she said dynamic play out in real time here.
Yeah.
And notice what the reporter does right after presenting those two completely different realities. They give us a contextual anchor.
Right. They mentioned the ceasefire.
Yes. They drop in the fact that there is an October 10th ceasefire currently supposed to be in place.
But the article is really quick to note that the reality on the ground is just daily violence, right?
Yeah.
And that both the Israeli military and Hamas are accusing one another of breaching this specific truce.
Exactly. The reporter is doing a very delicate balancing act there. They are presenting the fundamental tension of the war, this fractured ceasefire, without editorializing or stepping in to play referee.
But honestly, here's where it gets really interesting and where I think a beginner reader gets incredibly frustrated.
Why is that?
Well, if both sides are pointing fingers and both sides have an obvious incentive to spin the narrative, isn't the reporter just passing the buck?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Shouldn't a good journalist cut through the noise and tell me who is actually telling the truth?
Yeah.
Like, isn't just repeating their claims giving a megaphone to propaganda?
I completely understand why it feels that way. But this raises a really fundamental question about the purpose of breaking news itself.
Okay.
In the immediate aftermath of a strike, a journalist's job is not to act as judge, jury, and executioner.
Right.
They cannot definitively declare who broke a broader ceasefire or determine the ultimate moral truth of an airstrike within hours of it happening. Their primary job is to establish the baseline historical record.
So the goal isn't to hand me a final verdict.
Exactly.
It's just to document the argument.
Precisely. Side A claims X. Side B claims Y. And the surrounding context is a broken ceasefire. That is the factual reality of the political situation at that exact moment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Documenting an official claim is, in itself, documenting a news event. So for someone trying to get informed, the goal shouldn't be to read one wire report and walk away with absolute cosmic truth.
Right, right.
The goal is to understand the parameters of the dispute.
All right, I see where you're going with this. We have the broad parameters, but then the article zooms in and gets very specific about the source of the initial claim.
It does.
And this brings up a massive question for me. How does the reporter signal potential bias to the reader without inserting their own opinion?
Oh, they do it through aggressive transparency.
Okay, let's look at that. Because in the third paragraph, the article introduces Mahmoud Basal, and he is the spokesperson for Gaza's Civil Defense Agency. And then the reporter explicitly includes this really vital clause. They write that this Civil Defense Agency operates as a rescue service under Hamas.
Yes. That small dependent clause is arguably one of the most important pieces of journalistic framing in the entire clipping.
Right, because it's only after establishing that chain of command that we actually get Basal's specific claim.
Exactly.
He says, an Israeli drone fired 2 missiles close to a police post in the Al Bareid refugee camp.
Notice the discipline of the reporter here, though. They don't hide the organizational structure.
Right.
By explicitly stating that the civil defense operates under Hamas, the journalist gives you, the reader, the necessary context to evaluate the source of the information for yourself.
You know what it's like? It's a lot like reading a glowing 5-star review for a new tech gadget online.
Okay, I like this.
Like the review sounds amazing, it lists all these great features, but then you check the fine print at the bottom of the page, and you realize the review was actually written by a subsidiary of the company that makes the gadget.
Yeah.
You need to know who signs the paychecks to understand the lens through which the information is being presented.
That is a phenomenal analogy. It perfectly captures the mechanism of bias. It's all about media literacy.
Yeah.
The reporter doesn't need to write an opinion piece saying, hey, don't trust this guy. They just hand you the org chart and let you do the critical thinking.
But let me stop you there, because I really want to make sure I'm understanding the weight of this detail.
Sure.
Does adding that detail, the fact that the agency operates under Hamas, does that inherently discredit the physical, factual claim Balsal is making about the 2 drone missiles? Or is it purely about providing the full picture?
It does not inherently discredit the physical fact of the strike. Not at all.
Okay.
In a war zone, almost all official spokespeople belong to one of the warring parties. Information is a weapon, and completely independent officials are incredibly rare.
That makes sense.
So the journalist is essentially saying to you, the reader, look, here are the highly specific details of the strike, but I want you to be fully aware of the organizational affiliation of the person giving me these details.
Yeah.
It empowers the reader.
Which actually brings us to the most crucial part of this entire deep dive.
Yes.
Because we have a specific claim
Yeah.
from a spokesperson with a known political affiliation.
Yeah.
Basil says 7 people are dead, several more are wounded, and 4 of them are in critical condition.
Right.
If a journalist is doing their job properly, they can't just take the spokesperson's word for it and hit publish.
No, they absolutely cannot. And this is exactly where the article shifts gears.
Okay.
It moves from documenting political rhetoric to engaging in the incredibly hard, painstaking work of physical verification.
So what does that look like?
Well, they have to look for independent corroboration, and usually that's done through on-the-ground institutions. So in this specific case, they turn to local hospitals.
Okay, let's look at how the reporter actually does this, because they outline the steps right here in the text. First, the reporter contacts the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, located in central Gaza. The hospital reports that they received 6 bodies and 7 wounded.
Okay, hold on to that number.
Right. Then the reporter checks with a completely different facility, the nearby Al-Adha Hospital, and Al-Adha reports receiving 1 fatality and 2 wounded.
Now look at what happens when you combine those numbers.
Wait a second. 6 bodies at Al-Aqsa plus 1 fatality at Al-Adha, that equals 7 dead.
Yes.
That perfectly matches the initial claim made by the civil defense spokesperson. They're actually doing the math for us right in the article.
They absolutely are. It is a masterclass in basic clinical verification.
Wow.
But we should talk about the how, because this isn't as simple as making a quick phone call from a desk.
Yeah, I imagine not.
Right. In a chaotic conflict zone, how does a journalist sitting in Deir al-Balah safely verify that a hospital's casualty count matches a specific airstrike? How do they know it isn't just a result of the general daily violence we mentioned earlier?
That's a really great point, because if there is violence every single day, those hospitals must be overwhelmed constantly. How do they separate these 7 specific bodies from everything else?
This is where wire services rely on incredibly brave local journalists. They're often called fixers or local producers.
Right.
These are people who actually live in the community. They don't just call up and ask the hospital for a daily total. They physically go to the morgues. They speak to the intake nurses. They verify the names of the deceased.
Well,
And they cross-reference the exact time the bodies arrived with the reported time of the missile strike. So they are actively separating the data points in this sea of chaos.
so when we read that clinical math in the article, 6 here, there we're actually seeing the final result of hours of dangerous, methodical investigation.
Yes. And think about how this changes the entire weight of the story.
Yeah.
We started with an attributed claim, a says, from a politically affiliated source. But by doing this literal legwork across 2 different independent medical facilities, the journalist has verified the death toll.
Right. It is no longer just a spokesperson's claim. It is a medically corroborated fact.
Exactly.
But, the article doesn't just stop at the numbers. It goes further, and it includes these incredibly graphic quotes from the Al-Aqsa hospital staff. The hospital notes that 4 of the wounded are in critical condition. specifically because of, and I'm quoting the text directly here, direct impacts to the face, torso, and other parts of the body.
Yeah, it is a very stark, very difficult detail to confront as a reader.
It really is. And for someone just trying to catch up on the news, reading about facial and torso impacts can feel, well, almost like shock value.
I get that.
It feels deeply visceral for a short wire report.
Yeah.
So is there an actual journalistic purpose to including that level of physical trauma? Like, does it help verify the type of weapon used, such as the drone missiles the spokesperson mentioned?
That is exactly why it is included. It is the absolute furthest thing from shock value.
Really?
Yes. When you are trying to independently verify a military strike from afar, the nature of the injuries tells a forensic story.
Oh, wow. How so? Like, what is the medical description actually proving?
Well, think about it this way. If a building collapses due to structural failure, you expect to see crush, injuries, and asphyxiation, right?
Right.
If there is a close-quarters firefight, you expect to see bullet wounds. But if Mahmoud Basal claims that an Israeli drone fired 2 missiles into a camp, you would expect to see specific, localized trauma like shrapnel wounds, blast impacts, severe lacerations.
Right, right.
So by quoting the hospital about direct impacts to the face and torso, the journalist is taking abstract political rhetoric and grounding it in undeniable physical reality.
So the clinical description of the wounds serves as physical evidence that actually aligns with the claim of a missile strike.
Exactly. It forces the reader to confront the physical mechanism of what actually occurred on the ground. It just bypasses the political spin entirely.
Wow. When you break it down like that, you realize the reporter is basically building an evidentiary file in real time.
They really are.
I mean, they establish the initial claim, they provide the context of the broken ceasefire, they disclose the biases of the sources through the org chart, they do the math across multiple hospitals to verify the body count, and then they use forensic medical details to corroborate the nature of the attack itself.
Yeah.
And all of that happens in the space of maybe 5 paragraphs.
It is a perfect microcosm of what rigorous, methodical journalism looks like under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. I mean, it is incredibly transparent, and it is so careful with its language.
So if there's one overarching takeaway from this deep dive, one thing to put in your beginner's toolkit for reading the news, it's that consuming information has to be an active process, not a passive one.
Absolute.
You don't just read the words, you look at the architecture of the story. You check the dateline for proof of life. You look for the word says to spot the origin of a claim. You recognize the competing narratives without feeling the pressure to instantly take a side. You check who signs the paychecks of the spokespeople. And most importantly, you look for the hard, physical corroboration, like the hospital math.
Because being well-informed doesn't mean having some magical newspaper that hands you absolute, uncomplicated truth on a silver platter every morning. It means knowing how to read the blueprint of a story so you can separate the verified facts from the surrounding noise.
It means that when you walk into that dark movie theater halfway through the film, you actually have the tools to sit down, look at the clues on the screen, and figure out the plot for yourself.
Beautifully said.
But as we wrap up this analysis, I actually want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over on your own.
Oh, what's on your mind?
Well, everything we just discussed, calling different local hospitals, talking to the intake staff, tallying up the bodies, and recording the clinical nature of the wounds, that is incredibly painstaking work.
It really is.
Reporters have to rely on this slow process of physical verification because they often cannot safely stand at the actual impact site of a missile while a war is raging. It is careful, human, and very time-consuming.
Yeah, it takes hours, sometimes days to get it right.
Right. But we live in an era where modern warfare, and especially digital information, moves at lightning speed. Unverified claims, out-of-context videos, and rumors can spread across the entire globe in seconds on social media. So the question is, as the speed of digital information continues to accelerate, how will traditional journalists who rely on this necessary but inherently slow process of physical verification possibly keep up?
That is the big question.
How does the careful, methodical math of a local hospital compete with the instant viral speed of the internet? It is definitely something to think about the next time you see a breaking news alert flash across your screen.